Welcome to episode 14 of Haven of Horror. I'm Subject, this is Milton. We are discussing two films. Milton, I'm going to let you do most of the talking today because I have a bit of a headache. But I didn't waste 2 hours of my life watching Birdbox to not do this show. So, Milton, tell us about Birdbox.
I'm sorry, I blocked out my mind. You want us to talk about Birdbox first?
Yes.
Okay. So, I had a weird thing where I could have sworn that this movie was released before A Quiet Place, but apparently not. Because Quiet Place was released around April. Or no, sorry, at March, and then this one released in December. I don't even want to really talk about it's like this weird lightning in a bottle effect for when a terrible movie gets a lot of recognition because I guess of when it was released and the place it was released on. I mean, I understand that people like this movie. Some people really, really freaking like this movie, but I should probably just describe what happens in it.
That was what I asked, yes.
That is what you asked. It's just stuff that comes to mind because this movie leaves me jumbled. Because it itself is told in a non-linear fashion, apparently. Although it doesn't have to be.
Oh, I'll get into that.
Yeah, anyway. Okay, so Sandra Bullock plays a woman named Mallory, a pregnant woman who is basically caught in the middle of the apocalypse. What's causing the apocalypse? Some invisible monsters that if you somehow lock eyes with them somehow, then you become insane and you kill yourself. Or if you are already insane in some way, then you become one of their minions, and you're on a quest essentially to get everyone else to look at the monster. And eventually, Sandra Bullock gives birth, and there's another pregnant woman, and she gives birth as well. So she essentially takes care of two kids. And then she earns the award for worst mother of all time by deciding that for 5 years she's going to name this girl and this boy girl and boy.
I laughed when I first heard that.
Yeah, and after kind of cohabitating with these kids as well as a new love interest who is not the biological father of her child, but a more benevolent acquaintance who, and they develop a relationship, who I guess also had to consent to the idea of girl and boy and apparently give no objections to that idea. But anyway, eventually he dies. Sandra Bullock has to take her kids down a river and eventually make it to a refuge. All the while, as all of this is happening, they can't look when the plot is convenient or inconvenient. They have to be blind almost the entire time by using blankets as as for obscuring their vision, or rags or blindfolds or whatever. It and it's all told non-linear as well. We do cutbacks to present and to prologue sections. It does a lot of stuff that a lot of other movies have done, save for, of course, the blindfold thing. But I don't think it does anything particularly well, unfortunately. But there is one thing that it does a decent job at, is that the actors are able to do their jobs. You get, aside from Sandra Bullock essentially being, the star of the show, we also have other actors like John Malkovich as Douglas. We have others like Tom Hollander. I'm fairly sure we also get that one guy with the bleached hair. I'm fairly sure that's a musician, right? Yeah. Colson Baker, also known as Machine Gun Kelly, is Felix. Yeah.
Now I remember because everybody made a big deal that Machine Gun Kelly was in this movie because, and I'm not a big rap fan, but I am a casual like Eminem fan, and this was either right before or right after his big like fight with Eminem, and
Yeah.
like Eminem basically ended his rap career,
Yeah.
and I only know that because of the memes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this movie was a phenomenon, but I'm gonna argue with you a little bit on it's well liked. Because if you look at the Rotten Tomato meter, it's got a 64%, which is barely fresh. And I've only talked to one person that actually likes this. 90% of this movie's popularity was that stupid Birdbox challenge.
I guess I should probably clarify what I mean by really liked, because especially during its time, people were almost afraid to criticize Bird Box for the reasons that you have described. Um, it had a huge pull with some audiences during its time, and then it kind of started to wane after a bit. It still surprises me that this has a 64 rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but then again, it's a botched website anyway, so who knows what its popularity really is.
Well,
Uh,
and like we always say, like that's just a
yeah.
consensus. That just means more people gave it a slightly above average score, which is if you're putting it on a 10, I would put it at slightly below average. There are two movies in this film. One of them would be greatly interesting because I love the idea of them stuck in the house, uh, trapped by these creatures. The problem is that they botch it at every opportunity.
Yeah.
The rules are not consistent. Everyone's just an asshole from the start. And
It,
everyone they're doing the best they can with this material, but I don't like any of these characters.
it's they don't act like real people. It's very very strange, like asshole foils that's going on here. Especially John Malkovich's character is just
John
a very
Malkovich is just being John Malkovich.
true. It's but he's being like, especially. I mean, we know if you know his acting, profile, then this is the kind of character he would play. At the same time, it just doesn't work in the context, and he's so unlikable that you kind of just check out and no longer care what happens to him. You also don't particularly care about the other characters because they're very one note.
Well,
Um,
and like when he warns them not to bring the guy in the house, I'm like, duh. Like you don't bring some stranger into the house. And then spoiler alert, they're right because we changed the rules in the third act and suddenly even though he didn't know it or they didn't know it, he was crazy the whole time.
yeah, there's this whole thing of, and I take a little umbrage with this thing. Okay, so how insane do you have to be to qualify to be a minion, as opposed to just being, canned by this invisible force? Like,
The only
maybe
rule that
you,
we get is if you look at it, you want to die. You want
yeah,
to kill yourself.
yeah, unless you're insane, in which case apparently
But
you
see,
work
they
for the
never
town.
established that.
They
Nobody
do
actually
kind of, but not
says.
very well, unfortunately.
There is never a scene in the film where they establish that the mentally insane are drawn to this thing because that would be interesting, right?
They
It
sort of
just feels
kind of
like
say
a
it,
last minute. Oh, we need this to happen to move the
yeah,
plot along.
yeah. There's like small dialogue when like the intruder comes in where he kind of hints at it, and the wiki interprets it a certain way to say it's hard codified to say that insane people must become this way. I think it's a bad idea. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. And also, what counts as insane? Is it any sort of mental disorder, or is there like a certain threshold? Like if you have high functioning autism, are you at risk to be evil instead of just dying, or does it schizophrenia? I don't know, and they don't explain. There's a lot of stuff that's not explained here. A lot of rules that we need to know that aren't told to us at all. It gets frustrating
This
because
this script really feels like it was written post Batman Begins, and they just watched a couple of Christopher Nolan films and was like, "Hey, I can do nonlinear storytelling."
the weird thing is this is based on a book, and I don't know how well the book was developed. I need to do more research into that, but I'm fairly sure that based on what I've been seeing, that the movie is fairly accurate to the book.
I don't know. I didn't look into it because Honestly, I felt like I wasted 2 hours of my time with this movie.
It's
I
very
also
it's
don't
hard
buy
to
that
get
either of
through.
those children are 5 years old.
No, well, they're young. I'll give them
They're
that, but
young, but like I didn't know it was a 5 year gap until I looked it up on Wikipedia.
well, they did literally say 5 years
Oh, did
later
they?
after they did say that.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah.
I may have missed that because I
Oh no,
remember at the beginning.
I wanted to check out of this movie quite a couple of times, so I can definitely get you.
Well, because at the beginning of the movie, I was into it, right? Because it starts with the for future part of this film. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, they're running for their lives. They have to use their. They can't look at these things, and then it's just like a fadeaway into a flashback of her painting, and her sister are arguing. And I was like, wait, what?
They're very awkward transitions, and the pacing just doesn't work at all. Where we cut very quickly to present time for like a few minutes, and nothing happens, and then we cut back to the prologue. And
And you know
just a
what?
lot of that
If
happens.
you're gonna make a dumb monster movie and not explain the rules, at least let me see the fucking monsters other than like a little drawing.
That's why I think that it's like high low budget if you understand what I'm saying. Like they
Oh,
have
this
good
is super low budget.
yeah, it has good camera work for the most part, clear cameras, but here's
Well,
a here's a
okay,
set. Here's a house, you have a backyard, you have a river. It's like on location set filming, but it's not very
okay. To be
inspiring
fair though,
looking.
actually, I don't think it's low budget. It's all their budget went to Sandra Bullock, John Malkovich, um, etc.
Yeah, the budget for this was about $20 million.
For a lower budget horror movie, that's bigger than some of my favorite movies. Like,
Oh yeah, sure. No, the production company was like Bluegrass Films and Chris Morgan Productions. Um, Music by Trent Reznor. For any Trent Reznor fans out there.
I love Trent Reznor. I couldn't tell. It felt like he didn't care.
Yeah, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross were
Mhm.
like the two people on the music side.
All of Trent's like
Um,
movie soundtracks are with Atticus Ross, and most of them are really good.
yeah,
He
but
did like the Social Network, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
yeah, I couldn't tell you like what he did exactly. It's a very dull soundtrack,
That blows
if it's
my
even present at
mind.
all. Um, yeah, people don't really act like people. I still immediately Sandra Bullock's character. I thought at the beginning of the film that her calling the kids like boy and girl, I thought that was just an expression, just to be directed to meaning or something because but no, apparently she literally named the boy and girl, and I'm
So,
thinking by this point, like midway through the film, oh, you're crazy. I don't like
okay,
you at
to be
all.
fair though,
I,
like it's goofy and it immediately takes me out of the movie because yeah, she's stupid. But it's also consistent with her character. If she didn't want these kids, or at least she didn't
true,
want her kid, and now she's stuck with two of them.
true, and I understand that there's a thing of she eventually comes to terms with being a mother, and there's this idea of her finally coming to terms with it being endearing and giving them names. At the same time, you don't do that in a story unless you want us to hate this character.
That bothers you more than it does me.
I
I'd like to
suppose
know why she
so.
decided to keep this kid if she didn't want it in the first place.
By that point, the kid was already
Also,
born. I guess
well,
I don't
no,
know. He wanted to
because
perform like a. Well, I
she's
don't want to use these coded terms, but
well, no, because she's pregnant in the flashbacks, and then even then she doesn't want this kid. So
yeah,
I'm like, why did you keep it this long anyway? Like, not to be morbid, but
perhaps she felt morally, compelled to have it anyway, or maybe she was just in between decisions and never had
and
took the time to think about it clearly enough, or
and
something.
also I've forgotten some of this movie because it was boring.
Hmm.
Who's the dad for these kids? Because she
Oh,
seems
we
like a
don't know.
shut-in.
We don't know who the biological father is. He
Okay,
never appears. He's not.
because
He's
if
briefly mentioned in the beginning as someone who was essentially a roommate, and then they
oh, is
lose.
that who that was supposed to be?
We
Because like
don't.
they set her up as this like loner, like doesn't leave her room, and I'm like, okay, if she's this character, how is she pregnant? Like,
She's there because she got pregnant through her roommate, essentially.
okay. Yeah,
Or something like that.
I don't want to spend too much time trashing on this, but I really don't have anything positive to say.
It's very
other
hard
than
to
some of the set
compliment
pieces
the
were
film.
fine.
It's okay. It's nothing inspired. I constantly question the logic of this movie. It's very hard for me to suspend my disbelief, especially you don't even need to have sailing experience or boating experience to know you cannot navigate rivers like that blind. It just doesn't work.
I'm fine with that. That's a gimme for the movie.
But there's also still a lot of other things where you can't truly do this blind. How do you farm? How do you train?
I would be fine with that, because that is a conceit for this premise, but they can't even be consistent with the premise.
No.
If they were consistent with the rules, I would be fine with saying, okay, sure, yeah, they have to do all this blindfolded. Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much else to say other than this movie was boring.
Everyone in this movie would die. The world is doomed. There's no way to fight these things. They're invisible, apparently of corporeal bodies, and they can basically determine at will who they want to recruit.
Well, we're getting a sequel,
there's no hope in this dystopian future.
Well, we're getting a sequel, so we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, apparently we're getting one as of March.
Also, they want to do other language spin-offs of this film. I don't know what that means.
I don't know. A translation, a dub. I have no idea.
Is it going to be like Birdbox in England or Birdbox in China?
Or Birdbox in Mexico, Spain? I don't know. I think that the appeal for this movie has died out, so I'm not sure.
Nobody talks about this movie anymore. I forgot it existed until you spun the wheel last week. So my final thoughts are this movie was boring and wasted a potentially interesting concept, but I can't be mad about it because of the next movie we watched. But we'll get into that here in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5. I will never watch this again. What about you, Milton?
I'm going to give this a 1.5 out of 5. I think here's the thing. I might still give a movie a low rating if I at least found it entertaining. This movie is just bad and boring. I'll credit it to say that at least it has some technical competence in the very strictest sense. And that's it.
And you notice that kind of stuff more than I do.
It's a very skippable movie. Don't watch it. Don't do the Birdbox challenge,
Please don't do the Birdbox challenge.
Which was started in Australia by Netflix. We can blame Netflix for actually starting this trend.
Well, I blame Netflix for releasing this piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't watch this movie. It's not worth it. Don't buy into the hype. If you find someone who likes this movie, tell them about our channel where we berate you for almost 20 minutes about how terrible this movie is.
Okay, before we move on to the next film, do we have anything in chat?
No, not yet.
Okay. So, do you have any other thoughts? Because I did kind of interrupt you there. I'm sorry about that. Do you have anything else you want to say about Birdbox before we move on to a better movie?
No, I think 15 minutes is all we need to say about this movie. There's not a whole lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I do think it's hilarious that you can shoot blind and somehow be a threat to people. I find it hilarious that John Malkovich could have easily killed Sandra Bullock with a shotgun in that scene.
This reminded me of The Happening a little bit,
but
not as funny.
There's so many conveniences. There's no way these people could.
The other thing I noticed is I think this is the first time that we've done 2 movies from the same year.
Yeah, I guess so.
So our next film on our I guess subject or topic is A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski of all people. Written and directed by and starring, if I remember correctly. The biggest shocker for this was was a Platinum Dunes movie? I mean, it's way better than your average Platinum Dunes movie.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are not aware, like I'm thinking Milton's not, because he's not as ingrained into the horror culture as I am. Platinum Dunes in the early 2000s was the #1 studio pumping out horror remakes. They made Texas Chainsaw, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, the Friday remake, not Wrong Turn. It's a 70s movie with Rutger Hauer in it. What is the name of that movie? The Hitcher. They
Okay.
remade The Hitcher. Basically, like from 2003 to 2010, they were the #1 cause of horror remakes, and it's almost known as the Platinum Dunes era, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm looking at their filmography. Yeah, you have the ones that you said before. The Amityville Horror remake as well is another thing. They also did the Purge and the Purge Anarchy, Ouija, Project Almanac, which was not a horror as far as I'm aware. A few other things. They also did the live action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and its
Well,
sequel.
that's because, do you know who runs Platinum Dunes?
Oh, who?
Michael Bay.
Oh, okay.
Platinum Dunes is Michael Bay's production studio. Yeah, they've branched out in the last few years, but I think they're still most well known for those remakes, which range from it's okay to, oh my god, what did they make?
Yeah.
I loved this movie. This is taking that same concept of a monster that reacts to a certain sense. This time it's sound, of course, versus sight. So you have to be quiet or it will kill you. Not only is the script really good, it's a really simple story. They are creative with the sound. This movie scared the shit out of me because it was like quiet for the first like 20 or 30 minutes and then just wham. um,
It's very creative. It's using minimalistic expression and using it to its advantage. Um, Sign language is another big thing in this movie, along with actually speaking. We get more sign language than we get spoken word, which makes sense considering the premise of this movie, certainly. Yeah, the
yep.
part and the placement, and especially when we get to, towards the end, towards the climax, that scene especially, which I guess we'll get into spoilers.
Here in a bit.
Yeah, but yeah, that scene especially is like top, which we'll get into later once I can actually describe specifics.
But I really appreciated how creative they were with this premise. Certain scenes that they set up to be tense were actually tense. I liked almost all of these characters. The kids were whatever, but I'm usually not a fan of kids in films, so I'm forgiving on that. But I thought John Krasinski and Emily Blunt were great. And I felt bad at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think the kids do a fine job. I've definitely seen a lot worse.
I don't think they were bad. They're kids, and kids are annoying. So.
Well,
Also, this movie straight up, like at the beginning, sets the tone for this film with the kid that they lose.
Yes, I like it. I like that this movie like immediately shows consequences. It's probably the best way to introduce the monster and show like the natural consequences. Like if you act this way, you're gonna get got.
And see Birdbox, you can show the monster. Milton, what was the budget for this movie?
The budget for this movie, it was actually around a similar range. I'm seeing a vague thing between like 17 million and 21 million.
Okay.
Let's just assume that they had the same budget with Bird Box, just to compare them even more.
So I think it's complete. I know a lot of people might say, well, it's not fair to compare them. They're two different films. I think it is absolutely fair to compare them. They are using the same basic premise of a monster that hunts you based on one of your senses. And this movie makes Bird Box look embarrassing.
Well, Bird Box makes itself look embarrassing just on principle. But yeah, especially considering what's being done here. It's much more interesting to look at. Color correction is much more interesting, so it doesn't look so muted and bland. We're able to effectively use a lot more of the sets. We flesh out the main set of the farm. It actually makes it a lived-in space. Especially, we get some regional landmarks like the waterfall and whatnot. Um, yeah, the woods itself it also is given a bit of an edge because most of the danger seems to come from the woods. That's always a consistent thing.
Yeah.
And eventually seeing that danger encroach upon what should be a safe place. Yeah.
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 And I don't know if you agree with me on this. This felt like a modern day Carpenter film, taking a very simple premise,
Mm.
a family isolated out in the middle of nowhere with monsters out there, and not feeling the need to explain every little detail, just enough to know that the horror is there.
I wouldn't. Hmm. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just not sure how much that qualifies as Carpenter specifically, because other people have done this. That those sorts of things.
Well,
that you
yeah, but I
described.
mean, it's Carpenter's like the most well known of them.
I suppose. We don't have a whole lot of competition, unfortunately. Or yeah, I love John Carpenter's stuff. I usually, when I consider a John Carpenter film, I think of maybe some cheesy dialogue here and there, maybe some over the top stuff, but definitely more practical effects, I would say.
Well,
Um,
the practical effects was an issue with this movie. However, I didn't think the CGI took me out. In fact, I quite liked the monster design.
yeah,
And I'm gonna be honest, you know how like it has a head that like splits apart in all those little pieces?
yeah.
Not gonna lie, that freaked me out a little bit.
It's good design, I think. It's very interesting and alien. Which I guess is it implied that they're aliens or they're like what subterranean creatures
This
or
movie gives no backstory that I can remember.
but it's not but it's not as obnoxious as in Bird Box because at least we're able to see them. There are established rules and
And
they
they're
don't really go
consistent.
beyond them. It's consistent. And we actually have a way where we can fight them.
Yeah. Well, and like this movie's not interested in like the origin or whatever. It's very, and maybe this is why I'm comparing it to Carpenter, but this felt like an updated version of like an 80s or 70s film. We don't need to know where the monster came from. We don't need to know its weaknesses. We just need to know it is out there and we are following a group of people trying to survive.
Sure. And I'm glad it's not just that, because if it was just that, then we get Bird Box.
So I have to be honest, because you know they're doing a sequel to this as well.
Yeah, they are.
I'm in the middle. On one point, I don't necessarily want a sequel because the first temptation that everybody has when you make a sequel, bigger, badder, and we have to delve into like the origins. That is the mistake almost every franchise has made. But at the same time, the way they described this is still John Krasinski, and like he had an idea for a sequel, and he talked Emily Blunt into it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess we might as well get into spoilers by this point if we're going to talk about the potential for a sequel. Um,
Well, I mean,
John
there's no
Krasinski's
potential.
character.
Like it's
Yeah, should
happening.
we? Yeah, John Krasinski's character dies. He sacrifices his life so that his children can escape, so that they can, drift back in neutral. Um, so I think a main draw of this movie was from John Krasinski's character and the fact that he would be absent in a sequel. I think it wouldn't kill it, but it definitely takes out a major element of why people like the first film. Plus, from what we've said here with, the trappings of has to be bigger, badder, and we go into the origin, that's where you kind of have to go with the sequel. Because if we don't get more answers, with us being patient enough to go through the first movie, we need some sort of payoff for all the time investment we have here. So we want to know where these come from. Of course, that might take some of the element of suspense out of it, though, which makes me wonder: should there be a sequel, even if it was planned?
Okay, so the only thing I disagree with you on there is I don't think Krasinski was the draw at all, because this movie was sold on Emily Blunt's character. She's on all the posters. I don't remember the trailers because I don't even remember seeing a trailer for this. And its main selling point was basically the sound gimmick. Like, I love it in this movie, but let's be honest, it's a gimmick for the film that they mix the sound so that you are hearing what the protagonists are hearing. I think because Emily Blunt is confirmed to be the main character of the next film, and it's going to pick up, from what I've read, it is going to pick up right after the first movie. I think this movie could do well. I don't think it will be the like phenomenon that first film was.
Yeah, it's yeah, she is definitely very prevalent on the posters, certainly. She does have great presence in the movie. At the same time, so did John Krasinski. I think a lot of my favorite stuff comes when he's on screen. But not to say that I didn't like the other performances, though. I guess they could hold up. I guess I'm more worried though about where a sequel would have to go, and all the trappings and of what a sequel would have to be. And I think it might take away from I guess, the feeling from the first one a bit. I
It's that
think it's
risky run.
I think it's fine for this story to be a one and done thing. Let the production go into a new idea. I think that this production had, with all the money that's made from A Quiet Place, could easily make another movie with a new idea.
Well,
And
welcome to horror. It made money. There's 7 Nightmare on Elm Streets, okay, and there's 12 Friday the 13th.
Or welcome to Hollywood. We need to make a franchise out of everything.
Okay, but like horror does it the most out of like any franchise.
Yeah, you're right about that. Next to Star Wars, but yeah.
I'd say horror is worse. There's 9 Star Wars films. There's 12 Friday the 13th.
Okay, you're right. That's fair. You're correct. There are way too many horror.
And Star Wars is your fault anyway, so I mean.
Hey, now. That joke only makes sense if they're just listening to it.
Exactly. It's an inside joke. We'll explain it one day, listeners.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, this is another one of those, like, it's just a simple movie. I don't have a whole lot to say other than I really enjoyed this film. I need to rewatch it because I was in a voice chat with some people in a Discord, and I had them in one ear and I had the movie in another. So I'd like to watch this again. But yeah, this was great. I love a good monster flick.
Yeah. Another thing that I actually really like about this movie is, especially compared to Bird Box, which I'm going to say again, we get the idea of where like a personal disability could become a blessing, and sometimes in a way help you to look at a certain problem in a different way than perhaps more able-bodied people have. You have our deaf heroine here, who through her disability is actually has an opportunity to discover a weakness with these monsters, that namely insert this very high-pitched white noise is a detriment to these very sensitive hearing creatures, as opposed to Bird Box, where we have blind people. Blind people can survive and they're fine because they're blind, and there's no real nuance or like conversation that comes as a result of that. They just show up at the end.
Well, and the other thing that this movie does is it takes its time to show how things that we're just used to can be deadly. Something getting caught on a nail, or dropping something, or not so common, but when Emily Blunt steps on that nail.
Yeah. Which could happen, especially a lot of accidents happen in the home. A lot of
set up and payoff.
Yeah, you become complacent in a place you're comfortable in.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I do like this movie. I warm up to this more and more as I keep talking about it, because I recognize more and more stuff that I like. There are some small things where you might have to suspend disbelief like a little bit.
No, really, the movie where monsters that act on sound requires suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, I know, but I don't have to do the work for this movie that I had to do with Bird Box, especially. The movie does its work to suspend my disbelief for me, rather than me trying to have to, actively do that for myself, which I'm very thankful for. And I didn't think I'd have to be so thankful for until I watched Bird Box first and then going into A Quiet Place. It's like, oh, I can greatly appreciate the great things that you guys are doing, especially since I know how badly it could turn out. if it was just given less care.
Yeah.
What else can we say? Shotguns. Shotguns are great. Shotguns are a trapping of horror. I like the fact, however, in A Quiet Place that it has more of a presence than the shotgun ever does, or more purpose than the shotgun ever does in Bird Box, where we're carrying around guns for no reason, except for the fact that we read the script and we know things are going to happen in the future, but otherwise we have no reason to carry guns at all.
I will fight you on that one because we show that there are humans out there that have either gone crazy or are out to harm them.
Well, normally I would agree. Around the midpoint, I would agree because we see the one in the loading dock. But before then, there's not really much of a reason to have a gun, because
See,
all we've established by that point is that people who see the monster want to kill themselves, and will usually find a means to do it as quickly as possible.
See, I agree and I disagree because that is one of the downsides to the nonlinear storytelling, because they mostly have the shotguns in like the flash forward, right?
Well, the flashbacks.
Well, the flashbacks, the shotgun is just his own personal shotgun.
Well, yeah, but then he keeps brandishing it around for no reason.
Well, because he's an asshole. Like,
well, yeah, but you need, if you want to write a good character, he should be
okay,
that way.
But they didn't want to write good characters; they wanted to write assholes.
But this is why I criticize the use of the shotgun, because its presence isn't warranted for the most part until we get to the point where it's justified later. But then you question why they keep having it present.
Like, buddy, I appreciate your criticisms, but at some point you're just nitpicking. Like, it's a shotgun.
It's easy for me to nitpick Bird Box because I'm trying to look for anything worthy of conversation with them.
But we don't like to nitpick here. Like, I'm sorry, not to devalue your opinion, but him carrying a shotgun is not a problem.
Well, it's very prevalent through the movie. He has it as a means to threaten people.
He's a paranoid asshole. I fully believe that a paranoid asshole would keep a shotgun on him because he doesn't trust anyone else in that house, except the Asian guy for some reason.
Yeah, it's very selective. There's no consistency with.
Have you ever met old people?
I have. There's usually a reason why they are that way.
Well, and also to be fair, his wife died.
We're comparing real people to, fictional characters.
But to be fair on him, I'm going to take up for him a little bit because the first time we meet him, his wife goes nuts trying to help Sandra Bullock and steps into a flaming car.
Sure.
But yeah, that was Bird Box. Apparently we weren't done with it, but it still sucks. Don't watch it. Watch A Quiet Place instead. Which, since I brought up Rotten Tomatoes earlier, this has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I don't. Sometimes a bit of what holds us back for me enjoying this movie is that although I appreciate the minimalistic design, sometimes I like my movies to have more audiovisual input, but that's just a taste thing. I don't put that into my critical analysis.
It's okay. We know you're wrong.
But whatever. You're criticizing me for nitpicking Bird Box.
Well, but I mean, a big part of this movie is audio.
I know. For me, just saying.
Well, no, I'm not arguing with you. But I am curious now. What do you mean?
I guess with what I mean is like I like more dialogue-heavy pieces, I suppose. Again, just me is something of what I
that is completely fair.
Just something that I analyze with myself when watching the movie. But that's not the main draw of the film. The film is trying to do something else, and I think it does it pretty well. You're muted.
Yeah, I know. I had to mute for a second. Yeah, I mean, I like how this does it's for lack of a better term, gimmick of if they hear you, you die, and we set it off brutally at the beginning. John Krasinski and Emily Blunt lose a child. I didn't care, but it was kind of funny. They decided to have like another one, which seemed like a bad idea because it has evidence in the film. With I guess you can almost say it's the third act like tension moment is her going into labor.
There's a portion where I wonder I understand with this whole thing of like maybe the monsters just weren't there at the time. Being in labor and birth, babies are really loud. And
I'll give them that because they do show that the baby immediately starts crying.
true, I feel like there would be more consequences, and it seems very
Well, no,
situationally.
because they had set off fireworks to drown out the baby's cries.
I suppose. It also gets into an idea of like how much white noise can you put in to make yourself a bit safer, I suppose. But
But that also goes back to the like, at what point are you just nitpicking the movie?
well, I mean, they established pretty early on that like any sort of white noise is able to, drown out smaller noises and make yourself safe. I wonder in some cases, this is not necessarily a criticism. I wonder how safe like more industrial complexes are, or like fabrication units where there's a lot of white noise, where those could be like safe havens and shelters
Oh, don't worry,
and
that'll
stuff
be a
like that.
quiet place too.
Maybe. Um, yeah.
No, I mean, if Krasinski has a legitimate idea for a sequel, I will watch it.
Hmm.
But I don't. God, me like 10 years ago would have been like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I don't need a sequel. You know,
Yeah.
I'll watch it because this one was fantastic. Um, any final thoughts about A Quiet Place? These were two pretty simple movies, and I don't have a lot to say, so this is probably going to be a much shorter episode than usual. And part of it is that I'm not feeling well.
No, that's fine. What else can I nitpick about these movies?
God, I hate you. Can I trade him for the Canadian again? Like,
Whenever he's available. Um, just a decent, good overall movie. It shows competence over basic stuff, which I wouldn't say is like a. I shouldn't have to say that that's something worthy of praise, but I guess it is nowadays because there's more and more movies that kind of lose focus over the basics and the fundamentals. And this movie demonstrates its competence because it's working with minimal storytelling and minimal expression. And yeah, the fact that it does that and it does stuff well makes you appreciate what it's trying to do. Not so sure about a sequel, but I'll be patient and I'll wait. I'll see what they do with the sequel.
yeah. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. This is concept. This is execution over concept. This is a very simple concept executed to, I think, the best of these filmmakers' abilities and done really well. It reminds me of classic like 70s and 80s horror, but updated for the modern age. Awesome monster design. There's legitimate tension, which I haven't felt in a long time for a film. Likable characters, likable actors and actresses. Yeah, I would recommend this. It earned that 94 on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that I give a shit about Rotten Tomatoes, but
No.
yeah, I love this.
I don't know if it quite reaches a 4 for me. It's definitely quite above a 3. I'll say a 3.75 out of 5. It's still way above average. I have to rate with myself, honestly. But you know what? Yeah, sure. I'd watch this movie again. Yeah.
All right. So what we're gonna go ahead and do, and like I said, this is gonna be a shorter episode. My sinuses are killing me. Milton, why don't you pull up the wheel?
Sure thing.
And just because we didn't really get into it, because like I said, I haven't been feeling good, so I didn't pull up news or anything. But some last minute announcements. We'll do this at the end. The first episode of our Let's Play for Resident Evil 7 is up. I have 3 more in the queue. Over the next week or so, I'm trying to spread those out. Because I'm going to be honest, our gaming videos aren't doing great. But I enjoy doing them, so they're not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
So check those out. And then we are almost done with Buffy Season 2. Yeah. So a spoiler cast or discussion video will be coming up within the next week or two. Probably in 2 weeks.
Probably 2 weeks, because we want to make time for Resident Evil 7 before we get to 8.
Yeah.
And once we're done with that, yeah.
Also,
other
last minute announcement.
At some point, we'll get into Hellboy. Don't worry, it is coming. It is coming
eventually. Other last minute announcement is I do have Returnal pre-ordered. It comes out Friday. It is a horror game as well. I don't know what I'll be doing with it, but I would like to upload some gameplay to the channel just once I see what it's like. So keep an eye on that as well. And I will get back to Days Gone and The Last of Us.
Okay.
All right.
How's that wheel looking?
Looks good. Go ahead and roll the wheel.
Excellent. And fingers crossed it's not going to be... yeah.
It's not what?
It's not going to be something on par with these picks. I'd love to have like 2 movies that I enjoy. At least we got A Quiet Place. At least that turned out well.
Oh. Fuck. Okay, so next week, Underworld and Blade. I hate my life.
At least it's schlocky action.
No, Blade is fine. I just don't like Underworld.
I mean Underworld. Blade is...
Oh, Underworld is boring as shit. All right. We did make a rule that we will not respin it. Make sure you, if you haven't already, take off A Quiet Place and Birdbox.
It's already off, yeah.
And then we can now remove Underworld and Blade. We will do that next week.
Yeah.
And I want to die. No.
Hey, maybe we'll see something we haven't seen before.
No, because I've seen both of these.
I don't know. Maybe upon reinspection. I'd like to hope, John. Give me hope, please.
No. Fuck your hope.
No.
But yeah.
All right.
Honestly, I think that is going to be it for me. My head is starting to hurt again. Do you have any final thoughts, wrapping statements? Please, for mercy.
Get your head feeling better, man. Feel like you at 100%.
Yeah. Hopefully next week will be a little bit of a longer episode. How long have we been going?
We've been going for about 46 minutes.
So yeah, this is definitely going to be the shorter episode. I just didn't have a lot to say about either one of these. Like, one was bad, one was good.
Yeah, just in very simple ways. I like the main heroine's performance. I liked overcoming guilt and how that goes into dealing with being a daughter and dealing with like father issues as well, and with communication as a family.
I did like the father-daughter storyline, especially the payoff is, of course, because like she thinks he's mad at her. He thinks that she's angry because he blames her for the death at the beginning of the film, if I remember correctly. And obviously the payoff is him sacrificing his life, and their final words being, "I love you."
Yeah, in sign language especially.
You got to spin those wheels better, man. Like, you keep giving us shit.
I do one thing. I click.
But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out.
Pull up the wheel next time. Let's see what happens.
No. No, because if I do it, it'll take us off the screen.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out. Again, sorry this was a short episode, but we will be back Sunday with some Resident Evil 7 over on Twitch. The link is in the description below, so make sure to click on that if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Anchor, one of the other platforms that we're on, just ignore this part. I'm sorry, but we appreciate you all equally, and we love you guys, and thank you so much for watching.